Have you ever heard such an absurd time travel story? He didn't become like the characters in other stories. He didn't become a wicked villainess or a saintly heroine. Instead, he went against the grain and became a crow. He was originally a diligent zookeeper. Don't let his small body fool you. He harbored grand dreams. He adored ferocious beasts, obsessed to the point of no return. In his eyes, these beasts were both aloof and wild. He even found them a tiny bit sexy. This day, his colleague, who usually oversaw the predator enclosure, was out with a bad case of diarrhea. He finally got his wish to work in the big cat section. Outwardly, he appeared calm and collected, but inside, he was ecstatic. Heaven, seeing his devotion, offered a small response. A colossal creature rushed towards him and gave him a loving embrace. When he opened his eyes again, he was met with a lush jungle. He instinctively reached for his phone, but the texture felt wrong. He hurried to the riverbank. Reflected in the water was a crow. His jaw dropped. He cursed the heavens for their injustice. Even if he couldn't become a novel's heroine, at least let him be a cool, ferocious beast. Considering a crow's diet, it wasn't exactly human food. He had no choice but to search for some fruit to tide him over. Suddenly, he heard a commotion coming from the jungle ahead. A clever idea popped into his little bird brain. Instead of tiring himself out searching for food, why not find an owner to be his ATM? Having found his direction, he flew straight towards the noise. He was already planning how to act cute and win his owner's favor. When he burst through the jungle, he was met with a group of hulking beasts. Despair washed over him. He couldn't help but curse again. This, however, made him realize he was in a fantasy world. He just didn't know yet whether he'd landed in a novel or a game. He learned from these calamus that they were searching for a human. He decided to find this human before they did. After a period of relentless flight, he finally spotted his target in a patch of jungle. The man had golden hair and a handsome face, but he seemed to be severely injured. What surprised him most was that the handsome man looked increasingly familiar. He felt like he'd seen him somewhere before. Who would understand? Just because he, as a human, had a fondness for ferocious beasts, the gods of fate had arranged for him to be reborn as a crow. Having arrived in this other world, just by glancing around the beastly crowd, he discovered the unique male protagonist leaning against a tree on the verge of death. At this moment, the protagonist, Kamet, was leaning against a tree, exhausted. He had just been betrayed by his partner. Chased and beaten by a group of calamus, he was left heavily wounded. As he drifted in and out of consciousness, he heard the cawing of a crow. In this world, crows were considered unlucky symbols of death, but he was surrounded by calamus, so he didn't dare make any sudden moves to scare the crow away. Suddenly, the crow cawed loudly. Kamet, sensing danger, started to get up, ready to tear the crow apart. Before he could act, the crow took flight. This crow was our protagonist. He had caught on purpose to attract the Kalami's attention. He hadn't chosen to help the protagonist because of his looks. It was because the protagonist looked familiar. He just couldn't remember if he was from a novel or a game. To figure out where he was, he had to ensure the blonde protagonist survived. And so, he lured the calamus to the edge of a cliff. When he returned to where the protagonist had been, he found him gone. Seeing the bloodstains on the ground, he realized how serious the injuries were. He decided to find some herbs to stop the bleeding. Though he didn't know how to identify medicinal plants, he could rely on his crow instincts. Kamet went to the stream. Firstly, to wash his wounds, and secondly, to mask his scent and avoid pursuit. He was puzzled by the crow's behavior just now, but also deeply grateful. The crow had led Kamet away, saving his life. A wry smile touched his lips. To be rescued by a bird symbolizing death, the irony wasn't lost on him. As Kamet pondered this, a flurry of leaves suddenly fell upon his head. Reaching up, he found they were concealing a poultice of herbs. He looked up and saw the crow beckoning to him. Kamet's heart leaped. This was no ordinary bird. Could it be the pet of some powerful figure? Or perhaps a bird person, or even the dragon race? He quickly dismissed these fantastical notions as improbable. Once he'd bandaged his wounds, the crow dropped a few fruits at his feet. Kamet spoke to it questioningly, and, as if understanding, the crow gestured for him to eat. He picked up the fruit and chewed thoughtfully. Their sweetness offered a momentary respite from his dire situation. He had been injured, and the crow, out of some unknown kindness, had saved him. From that point on, he and the crow began a strange, sort of shared existence. Relying on the crow's instincts, Kamet was able to find medicinal herbs. The crow, in turn, provided warnings of any approaching danger. Keramet, for his part, prepared specially seasoned roasted food for his feathered companion. This culinary offering freed the crow from a monotonous diet of insects. Thus, man and bird supported each other, each becoming an indispensable part of the other's life. Keramet even gave the crow a rather nice name, Reyna. Reyna recalled their first encounter, Keramet's face etched with suspicion. But now, that wariness had vanished, replaced by a constant, happy smile. His face was filled with tenderness, and he often called her name softly. A feeling Reyna couldn't quite articulate welled up within her. It was like being singled out by your favorite musician at a concert. Then, Keramet reached out and gently stroked her head. As a 21st century woman, she instinctively recoiled. Yet, her body betrayed her. As a crow, the sensation was undeniably pleasurable. Seeing Reyna's evident enjoyment, Keramet laughed. But beneath the laughter, a melancholic thought stirred within him. Until now, he had been surrounded by sycophants and flatterers. Only this crow, a symbol of death, had shown him genuine kindness. This idyllic life tempted him to abandon everything and simply live with Reyna. However, duty and destiny called to him. For the sake of the knights who had sacrificed their lives for him, and for the sake of his younger brother, who coveted the throne, he had to return to the palace. His most urgent task was to awaken his own latent abilities. Only then could he confront his sibling. One day, while searching for herbs, Reyna spotted a gleaming gem nestled amongst the trees. Uninterested, she intended to continue her search. But Herwa was no match for her crow instincts. She flew straight towards the gem. What she did next mortified her. She found herself lying in the grass, toying with the glittering stone. It was this very gem that triggered a memory. This world, it was the setting of a game she had played years ago. The gem, she now recalled, was called a crovancro, an artifact capable of awakening latent abilities. The details of the game were hazy, lost to time. She cursed the whims of fate. This was surely a cruel joke. Remembering Keramet's royal status and the danger he was in, she resolved to bring him the gem. Perhaps, once he ascended the throne, she might find a way back home. Keramet stared at the rare artifact in disbelief. He had two choices. 1. Risk it all and potentially triumph. 2. Risk it all and potentially end up 6 feet under. But he couldn't afford to hesitate. To achieve his goals, he had to gamble. He told Reyna that if he perished, she should fly free. He was the crown prince, framed and left for dead because of his exceptional handsomeness. At death's door, fate had sent a crow to save him. A crow who not only saved his life, but also won his heart, and even found a rare item that could awaken his abilities. After Keramet finished his bold proclamation to Reyna, he swallowed the fruit in one gulp. Instantly, a golden light erupted around him, so bright it made Reyna's crow face flush. It reminded her of Keramet's paid content in the game. But this same golden light also attracted the Calamus. Seeing this, Reyna cursed the Calamus under her breath for their terrible timing, disrupting such a crucial moment. Utterly exasperated, Reyna knew what she had to do. For Keramet to awaken successfully, she had to protect him with her small crow body, holding off those ravenous beasts. Reaching Keramet's side, she found him at the critical juncture of his awakening. The power of the fruit brought him unprecedented pain, as if he were being crushed over and over again by a steamroller. If it weren't for the image of his knight sacrificing himself to protect him flashing through his mind, Keramet would have given up. With a sky-splitting roar, Keramet's transformation was complete. He charged into the pack of beasts, tearing left and right with terrifying speed. The Calamus scattered, fleeing in abject terror. Seeing that Keramet had successfully awakened, Reyna, finally succumbing to exhaustion, plummeted towards the ground. In the nick of time, Keramet frantically caught her. Why, when he could have escaped, did she stay by his side so foolishly? Looking at the gravely injured Reyna, he felt a surge of weariness at constantly being protected by others. He hated his own helplessness. After a long while, Reyna awoke in agony. Seeing herself enveloped in a blue light, she panicked. Flapping her wings, she cawed frantically for Keramet. Her cries drew him in. He gently lifted her onto his arm, reassuring her that she was safe. They were now at the residence of his most trusted knight. Keramet introduced the healer who had tended to her. Coming back to her senses, Reyna realized she was no longer in pain. Seeing this, the healer discreetly left the room. As soon as he was gone, Keramet pulled Reyna close, holding her tightly. He had been terrified that she wouldn't make it. As a self-proclaimed connoisseur of beauty, Reyna nearly had a heart attack from Keramit's words and actions, almost dying right then and there. What frustrated her most was that she was stuck as a crow in this scenario. Even if she had the handsome prince's affection, what good was it? Keramit would eventually marry someone. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. She decided that as long as he remained single, no one would get close to him. Forgive me for my uncharitable laughter, folks. A breathtakingly beautiful man was confessing his feelings for her. And she was a crow. She had his heart, but she couldn't have him. This unrequited love left a bitter taste in her metaphorical mouth. She made a silent vow. If she couldn't have him, no one could. Keramit, looking at the agitated Reyna, mistakenly thought he had held her too tightly and hurt her. The two continued their conversation, completely misunderstanding each other, one apologizing profusely, the other cawing in frustration. Even the most handsome face needs a sweet, soothing voice. Keramit recounted everything Reyna had done for him. Not only had she saved his life in a moment of peril, but she had also found the rare item that allowed him to awaken his powers. He felt indebted to her and swore that no matter what happened, she would always hold an irreplaceable place in his heart. Keramit's words were so tender that even the ranting Reyna couldn't help but feel a blush creep up her feathery cheeks. She gently perched on Keramit's shoulder, nuzzling her head against his cheek. Keramit, delighted, assumed she had forgiven him. However, he underestimated a crow's possessiveness, especially one inhabited by a young woman. If any admirers appeared, she would make sure they regretted it. No one would get near him. Just then, a handsome, masculine knight knocked and entered the room. Reyna recognized him. He was one of the characters she had romanced in the game, Gale Knox. He knelt before Keramit, blaming himself for failing to protect him. With that, he drew his sword, intending to take his own life. Sensing the impending disaster, Keramit swiftly intervened, cutting off Gale Knox with a masterful display of his newfound charisma and a persuasive argument. Keramit's magnanimity completely disarmed Gale Knox, leaving him humbled and prostrate. He picked up the discarded arrow, raised it above his head, and swore an oath of unwavering loyalty to Keramit, vowing to follow him even unto death. Keramit accepted the offered sword, resting it on Galanox's shoulder as a sign of his renewed allegiance. Observing this, Reyna felt a surge of gratitude towards Keramit for preventing the handsome knight's self-destruction. A nagging question tugged at Reyna's mind. Why hadn't Keramit told Gale Knox about his awakening? She quickly dismissed the thought, reasoning that Keramit likely had his own considerations. How to be a proper crown prince. First, one needs devastatingly good looks. Second, a silver tongue, capable of charming a crow into a state of utter euphoria and persuading even his own men into devoted submission. Gale Knox, still puzzled by how Keramit had escaped, listened as Keramit introduced Reyna. When Gale Knox realized a crow had saved Keramit, his preconceived notions about the bird made it difficult for him to accept. And being the straightforward man he was, he made no effort to hide his skepticism. Reyna, on the other hand, beamed with pride as Keramit described her role in his rescue, her expression practically shouting to Gale Knox how incredibly capable she was. But Gale Knox interpreted her expression as pure arrogance. If Keramit hadn't been there, he would have relished the chance to put this crow in her place. Emerging from his captivation with the crow, Keramit finally remembered the situation at hand. He questioned Gale Knox about what had happened during his absence from the palace. The next order of business was how to deal with his foolish younger brother. He had kept his awakening a secret from Gale Knox for a specific reason. He anticipated a satisfying showdown. Reyna's heart ached for Keramit as he spoke of the political machinations within the palace. She gently nuzzled against him, offering a silent comfort that seemed to bolster Keramit's confidence. After a period of rest, Keramit decided to return to the palace. Reyna, filled with a sense of wonder, imagined the palace's grandeur. But she also knew she had to be extremely careful. The palace was full of Keramit's enemies. Reyna felt a strange sense of gratitude that, as a crow, she wouldn't be seen as a weakness for Keramit. Keramit approached and gently picked her up. Reyna's heart fluttered with anticipation for the journey ahead. To her utter shock, the next moment she found herself imprisoned in a cage. She was completely bewildered. Although Keramit apologized, Reyna was too outraged to listen. She rattled the bars of the cage, squawking furiously at Keramit, calling him all sorts of names for daring to lock her up. Clearly, Karamit couldn't understand her avian ranting. The bumpy carriage ride soon left Reyna completely disoriented, feeling like she had the worst hangover imaginable. Later, under the cloak of night, Karamit released her. He looked at Reyna with concern, apologizing profusely. He hadn't considered that a crow might be susceptible to motion sickness. Reyna, having recovered slightly, promptly treated Karamit to a vigorous pecking massage with her beak. This, however, did little to quell her anger, and she continued to berate him. One moment she was furious. The next she was basking in the soothing caress of Karamit's hand. It was almost laughable. Having been a zookeeper, she knew intimately how much animals hated small cages. Yet here she was, transformed into a crow, caged by the very man she had saved. Upon being released, she had intended to give him a piece of her mind. But in the next instant, she found herself melting under his affectionate touch. Seeing Reyna's temper subside, Karamit finally explained his reasoning. He had caged her not out of cruelty, but because he couldn't bear to leave her behind when he returned to the palace. He no longer cared about Reyna's true identity, whether she was someone's beloved pet, a bird person, or even a dragon. He only wanted Reyna to remain by his side forever. Having poured out his heart, Karamit gently kissed Reyna. The deep kiss sent Reyna's little bird brain reeling. When she finally came to, she clutched her face, utterly mortified. Her first kiss, stolen so easily. Before she could compose herself, Karamit began to speak seriously of his worries. Upon returning to the palace, he would face enemies among his father's court. He didn't know who to trust, who to suspect. In this precarious situation, the only one he could trust was Reyna in her raven form. Listening, Reyna understood the loneliness Karamit felt as the crown prince. She perched on Karamit's shoulder. Though as a raven she couldn't do much for him, she would always stay by his side. After many days of travel, the prince and the raven finally arrived at the palace. Seeing the opulent splendor of Karamit's room, Reyna, like a frog emerging from a well, gazed around in wonder. The glittering decorations, in particular, ignited her raven instincts, making her practically drool. Karamit had matters to attend to, so he entrusted Reyna to the care of a servant. Before leaving, he threatened the servant to treat Reyna well, warning that if even a single feather was missing, he would be fed to the ducks. But when the servant saw Reyna in the cage, his preconceived notions about ravens filled him with a certain apprehension. Hoping to appease Reyna, he presented her with a large plate of grubs. The sight of the wriggling insects nearly sent Reyna into a tailspin. She flapped wildly in the cage, finally unable to contain her terror, letting out a shriek that echoed through the palace. The scream reached Karamit's ears. He assumed he was so worried about Reyna that he was experiencing auditory hallucinations. He dismissed it, thinking he would return to her as soon as he finished his business. Just then, his younger brother, Levi Lin, came skipping up to him, a false smile plastered on his face. Levi Lin took Karamit's hand, feigning concern for his well-being, while secretly hoping he would disappear forever. Karamit, instead of reacting with his usual anger to Levelin's provocation, countered him. He saw right through Levelin's charade. He thanked him for the grand show of concern over his disappearance, but as the older brother, he felt ashamed that his brother would worry so much for him. Single for 20 years, and now I'm being shown up by a raven. Is there no justice? He thought to himself. He had thought that coming to the palace with the hero would mean a life of luxury, but instead, he was greeted with a plate of wriggling grubs. Meanwhile, our hero encountered the very person he least wanted to see. Faced with Karamit's retort, Levi Lin was rendered speechless. He dared to be so arrogant in front of Karamit because he had awakened his abilities years ago. This had earned him the support of various factions. But as Levi Lin grew older, he had become increasingly lost in a life of decadence. So much so that he hadn't even realized Karamit had also awakened his powers. As the saying goes, brevity is the soul of wit when words fail. Their meeting ended, each harboring their own thoughts. Karamit went alone to the old Wolf King's room. The old king's health was failing, yet he still keenly sensed Karamit's awakened aura. He was somewhat disappointed in Karamit's slowness to reach this point. Karamit didn't waste words. He declared his intentions to the old Wolf King, telling him to wait and see. This time, he would secure his right to the throne so that he could reunite his father with his long-deceased mother. Karamit said this because of an unwritten rule among the wolves. A wolf takes only one mate in their lifetime. If their mate dies, the wolf will sicken and eventually follow them to the grave. The old wolf king watched Keramet leave. His son's ambition filled him with pride. He couldn't help but think the cub has grown wings. He wondered what his wife would think of Keramet now. He longed for Keramet to ascend the throne quickly, because he couldn't wait to see his wife smile again. Back with Reyna, due to a bird's different digestive system, she was now ravenous. She cursed the clueless servant for feeding her grubs. Meanwhile, the servant wondered if he had somehow gotten his knowledge mixed up. This raven didn't seem to eat bugs. Reyna peeked at the grubs from beneath her wing. At that moment, she almost thought the repulsive insects looked appetizing. Saliva uncontrollably trickled down Reyna's beak. The repulsive insects tempted her taste buds, a morbid curiosity pushing her to the brink. Just as she was about to cross that line, a surge of her remaining humanity slapped her back to her senses. As Reyna wrestled with her inner demons, a warm hand gently stroked her. She weakly opened her eyes, as if witnessing a divine presence descending before her. What would a young lady, driven to the edge of depravity, do? Reyna, transported from another world, found the insects on the plate almost appealing. If Keramet hadn't returned in time, she might have lost the last vestiges of her human dignity. Keramet, flustered by Reyna's near-feral state, remembered that one's eyes couldn't hide their true desires. He quickly ordered his servants to prepare a feast of the finest delicacies. After indulging in the delicious meal, Reyna felt a wave of contentment, grateful she'd held on her last shred of humanity. As she savored the lingering flavors, Keramet beckoned her to the bedside. He opened a large box, revealing a dazzling array of jewels that momentarily blinded Reyna. To celebrate his safe return to the palace, Keramet offered Reyna the chance to choose any gem she desired. Reyna couldn't believe Keramet would bestow such generosity upon a mere raven. She couldn't help but fantasize. If she were human, would Keramet offer himself instead? With a mischievous glint in her eye, Reyna selected a gem and placed it in Keramet's hand. This gesture instantly captured Keramet's heart. He was touched that his beloved pet had offered him a gift. He embraced Reyna, vowing to declare her the national bird if he ascended the throne. Nestled in his arms, Reyna allowed herself a triumphant smirk. This raven knew how to charm. A few days later, Reyna, cooped up in a room for far too long, finally had the chance to stretch her wings. Her cheerful cawing, however, startled the gardener pruning the courtyard bushes. He grabbed his broom, ready to banish the perceived bad omen. If Keramet hadn't intervened, Reyna's life might have ended prematurely. As Keramet pondered how to protect Reyna within the palace walls, his younger brother, Levi-Lin, strutted towards them with an air of arrogance. Observing from her perch, Reyna felt a surge of dislike for this presumptuous younger brother. Levi-Lin approached Keramet and launched into a barrage of snide remarks. He'd heard that Keramet had assured the old wolf king he would secure the right of succession. Keramet didn't deny it. It was time to settle the matter. Who would become the next emperor, and who would lose their life in the process? Levi-Lin scoffed at these words, finding them utterly ludicrous. He mocked Keramet for his audacity, considering he hadn't even awakened. Keramet calmly retorted, pointing out that Levi-Lin, despite having awakened years ago, had yet to seize power. He advised Levi-Lin to give up, suggesting he was too young to handle the throne. The verbal sparring entertained Reyna immensely. Was this the famed struggle for the throne? Unable to contain his fury any longer, Levi-Lin initiated his transformation. He was ready to eliminate this nuisance by force. What's it like having a scheming little brother? Not only does he try to frame the protagonist while he's away, but he also dares to attack him in broad daylight. A major confrontation was imminent. A great battle was about to begin. Levelin's aura startled Keramet, but his transformed state left him bewildered. Having neglected his training, Levi-Lin resembled a rabid dog more than a wolf. All bark and no bite. He truly was all roar and no bite. Levi-Lin lunged at Keramet. As Keramet considered how to retaliate, a large, black feathered projectile slammed into Levi-Lin, knocking him off his feet. Keramet stared in disbelief. He hadn't realized Reyna possessed such a powerful headbutt. Not satisfied with merely knocking him down, Reyna pinned Levi-Lin with her claws, squawking furiously. Did Levi-Lin have the audacity to attack her, Keramet's beloved? Karamat watched this scene unfold with a mixture of amusement and exasperation. How could his brother be so pathetic as to be dominated by a raven? Meanwhile, Reyna continued to taunt Levi-Lin. The sheer humiliation sent Levi-Lin into a blind rage. His jaws, parted in a snarl, threatened to swallow Reyna whole. Seeing Reyna in danger, Karamat sprang forward with a swift martial arts move, pinning Levi-Lin to the ground once more. This combined assault, a 1-2 punch of Karamat's strength and Reyna's surprising attack, left Levi-Lin battered and bruised. Karamat couldn't resist a taunt at his brother's pathetic display. It seems you haven't just taken on the form of a dog, but the mind of one as well. Such reckless abandon, transforming right here in the courtyard. I don't recall any stray dog blood in the royal lineage. Levi-Lin, wounded and sprawled on the ground, seethed with indignation. Karamat is nothing but an unawakened failure, he snarled. Karamat remained unfazed, a hint of disdain in his voice. Being unawakened doesn't equate to being powerless. Dealing with someone as weak as you is still child's play. Levi-Lin had come to intimidate Karamat, but instead he slunk away, his pride in tatters. After Levelin's departure, Karamat considered the situation. He could have unleashed his awakened power and subdued Levi-Lin in an instant, but now wasn't the time. The factions supporting Levi-Lin were complex, and revealing his full strength too early would be counterproductive. But that was a matter for later. A more pressing issue demanded his attention. He beckoned Reyna to his side. Karamat gently grasped the silken-fused raven. He decided it was time for a lesson on the dangers of reckless behavior. Who would believe it if they hadn't seen it with their own eyes? A wolf, pinned to the ground and pecked at by a raven. Reyna's protective instincts were admirable, of course, but her impulsive actions had worried Karamat deeply. Back in his room, Karamat sighed, scolding Reyna gently. Levi-Lin may be weak now, he explained, but he's still a wolf. A desperate counterattack could have injured you. Reyna, facing Karamat's reprimand, felt a pang of wronged, but unable to speak. She could only nuzzle against Karamat and chirp softly. Such an adorable display softened Karamat's heart, but he continued his gentle lecture. Reyna needed to understand the importance of caution. He'd been concerned about Reyna's impulsiveness ever since she'd flown at Karamat's attacker without hesitation. What if something had happened to her? Reyna understood his concerns. She dared to intervene because of her past life's knowledge of wolf behavior, combined with her innate raven instincts. Dealing with a pathetic wolf like Levi-Lin had been surprisingly easy. She understood Karamat's worry. It was like when her own dog had snapped at her in her previous life, she'd been furious. Knowing she'd been reckless, Reyna nuzzled Karamat's hand and chirped reassuringly, promising not to worry him again. Karamat sat beside Reyna. He was capable of protecting himself now, and he didn't want Reyna to risk her safety for him. Meanwhile, Levi-Lin, back in his own room, raged, smashing furniture in a fit of impotent fury. He couldn't bear the humiliation of being attacked by a mere raven. If he ever ascended the throne, he would exterminate every raven in the kingdom. Then, Levelin's cunning intellect reasserted itself. He realized Karamat's unusual attachment to the raven. Perhaps, he thought, he could use this raven to his advantage. Levi-Lin approached a mirror. Mirror, mirror, who will be the next emperor? The mirror rippled, and the image of an old man appeared within its depths. In a raspy voice, the old man proclaimed, Levi-Lin. Levi-Lin immediately instructed the old man to prepare something for him. The next day, Karamat was in his office, attending to official matters. Reyna, perched on Karamat's shoulder, was dozing peacefully. A knock at the door interrupted her slumber. She quickly slurped back a stray droplet of drool. A handsome, dark-haired man with striking green eyes and a friendly smile entered the room. Reyna, with a startled chirp, flew towards him. Just how strong was a raven's pursuit of beauty? She already had the devastatingly handsome crown prince at her beck and call. Yet, the appearance of another long-admired, handsome man seemed to have completely flustered her. Reyna gazed at the silver-haired man, a look of pure infatuation on her face. This beautiful man was Nimue, the eldest son of a duke and a powerful mage. At the same time, his most important identity. He was the true male lead of the game. In her past life, Reyna could only click on him through a phone screen. She never thought she would be lucky enough to meet him in person. Reyna, completely disregarding her raven form, rubbed herself against Nimue incessantly. Her intimate actions utterly shocked Karamet. He couldn't believe Reyna would be so affectionate with a stranger. A pang of jealousy pricked at his heart. He quickly strode over to Reyna and scolded her for embarrassing him in front of their guest. Reyna felt a flush of embarrassment. She had been so blinded by Nimue's beauty that she'd forgotten her own handsome prince. She was about to justify her fickle behavior when Karamet pinched her leg and warned her he'd deal with her after the guest left. Reyna's peculiar charm piqued Nimue's interest. A talking raven was a first for him. It made Nimue want to study Reyna's anatomy. This statement startled Karamet, who instinctively took a few steps back, protectively holding Reyna close. Snapping out of his thoughts, Nimue remembered the purpose of his visit. He pulled a dazzling necklace from his pocket. Nimue hadn't expected Karamet to commission him to imbue a necklace with magic. He didn't know who it was for, but it was clearly meant for someone Karamet cherished. Spoken without thought, heard with intent. Nimue's words sparked confusion in Reyna. Was Karamet going to abandon her and marry someone else? Reyna's imagination ran wild, conjuring up a whole scenario. Karamet, after marrying, wouldn't abandon her, but instead adopt her as his daughter. At this thought, Reyna, in all her raven-hearted drama, decided she'd rather be abandoned than live such a life. Just as she was wallowing in despair, she felt a weight around her neck. Snapping back to reality, Reyna realized the necklace was for her. Her spirits instantly soared. As she happily swayed, the necklace suddenly tightened, startling her. This made Nimue realize the necklace was intended for the raven. No wonder Karamet had asked him to imbue it with size-adjusting magic. Karamet held Reyna's leg a little tighter, his voice full of affection. He had the necklace made to prove that Reyna was his beloved. The little raven had conjured up a wild fantasy over a simple necklace. She had thought he was going to abandon her and run off with some other bird, but then the necklace was placed around her neck. This made her realize that she was the one he cherished most. Having declared his devotion, Karamet's protectiveness intensified. He glared at Nimue, warning him to stop thinking about Reyna. Nimue simply smiled. He had another purpose for his visit besides delivering the necklace. He offered Karamet his allegiance, hoping for protection after Karamet ascended the throne. Nimue's bluntness made Karamet wary. He couldn't understand Nimue's true motives. Nimue sighed, explaining his predicament. His father, a royal who failed to awaken his powers, had always warned him to stay away from political turmoil. That's why Nimue chose to become a mage. But in Levelin's eyes, mages were nothing more than tools to be used and discarded. Furthermore, if Levi were to become king, not only would mages be persecuted, but the entire kingdom would be in danger. This was not something he wanted to see happen. Karamet understood the gravity of the situation, but Nimue's words alone weren't enough to earn his complete trust. Karamet's hesitation made Nimue realize he needed to offer something more concrete to dispel any suspicion. He produced a vial containing the awakening tool, Kronkaro. Reyna froze, bewildered. Why did Nimue have that? She felt a nagging sense that she'd forgotten something important. Suddenly, she remembered. In the game, Karamet's awakening was thanks to Nimue offering him Kronkaro. A wave of unease washed over Reyna. The storyline of this world seemed to be deviating because of her actions. What if the world was destroyed because of her? Nimue's candor gradually eased Karamet's suspicion, but he still didn't understand why Nimue hadn't used it himself. For Nimue, he preferred to delve deeper into the path of magic rather than get involved in the struggle for the throne. This explanation finally earned him Karamet's complete trust. And so, the two handsome men, united by a common goal, joined forces. After Nimue left, Karamet wrestled with the question of whom to give the fruit to. The only one he could think of was Reyna. However, he worried about the dangers Reyna might face if she consumed it. Meanwhile, Reyna only wanted to get rid of the superfluous fruit. Its very existence felt like a ticking time bomb. Who knew what might happen to the world because of it? However, the glittering allure of the fruit proved too much for Reyna's raven instincts. He snatched the fruit from Karamet's hand. Karamit panicked, urging Reyna not to swallow it, explaining its potential dangers. But his words were lost on the raven, whose mind was now completely fixated on the fruit. In a single gulp, Reyna swallowed the gem. By sheer dumb luck, he had obtained the rare fruit. This caused the protagonist to awaken prematurely, creating a deviation in the timeline. To deal with the extra fruit, he swallowed it whole. Karamit frantically pried open Reyna's beak, hoping he could somehow spit it out. He had experienced the agonizing pain of awakening firsthand. He worried Reyna's small body wouldn't be able to withstand it. He couldn't bear the thought of watching Reyna suffer. If anything happened to Reyna, he would lose his reason for living. They stared at each other, one frantic, the other inscrutable. A few moments passed. Reyna seemed to regain his senses and let out a small burp towards Karamit, leaving him utterly bewildered. He couldn't understand why Reyna showed no reaction. Relieved that nothing seemed amiss, he hoped Reyna wouldn't eat anything so carelessly again. Reyna, confused, couldn't remember what had just happened. From Karamit's reaction, however, he guessed he must have eaten the fruit. He quickly checked himself over, finding nothing wrong. He felt a pang of disappointment. He had hoped to become some sort of raven man, but nothing had changed. He wondered if he'd eaten a fake. Before he could dwell on it, a sharp pain shot through his body. Karamit was terrified. He held Reyna tightly, calling his name. Karamit summoned the kingdom's finest healers, but they found nothing wrong with Reyna. Karamit was suspicious. Reyna had been burning up. How could there be nothing wrong? After the healers left, Karamit was consumed by guilt. If he hadn't taken out the fruit in front of Reyna, none of this would have happened. All he could do now was stay by Reyna's side and pray for his recovery. Meanwhile, Reyna was having a strange dream. He wandered aimlessly through an empty void, wondering if he was dead. He lamented the unfairness of it all. There were still so many things he wanted to do with Karamit. Suddenly, a raven appeared in the air and began to tell Reyna ancient stories of their kind. The next morning, Karamit woke with a start. He was angry with himself for falling asleep. Then, Reyna flashed into his mind, and he rushed to check on him. He was stunned by what he saw. Curled up on the bed, fast asleep, was a beautiful young woman. He had been consumed by guilt over his beloved raven eating the fruit. But now, waking up to find a young woman in his bed, he couldn't help but wonder who had stolen his raven. Karamit stared at the mysterious girl in disbelief. He wondered if she was an assassin sent by his younger brother, Levi Lin. But when Karamit saw the necklace around the girl's neck, he realized that this was Reyna, the raven who held his heart. Karamit gently brushed a strand of the girl's hair from her face. It felt as soft as a feather. Could the fruit have transformed Reyna into a human? Karamit's movements stirred Reyna awake. She sleepily asked Karamit if it was time for breakfast. Then, suddenly, she realized something was wrong. He abruptly looked at his wings, astonished to discover they had transformed into hands. Reyna, belatedly realizing what had happened, leaped off the bed in a panic, frantically searching the room for a mirror. Seeing Reyna so agitated, Karamit quickly scooped her up and urged her to calm down. He then led Reyna to a mirror, encouraging her to take a good look at her current appearance. Reyna stared incredulously at her reflection. Skin as smooth as porcelain, large, jewel-like eyes, and long, glossy black hair. She looked completely different from her previous life. Yet, she found this new, delicate body disappointing. If she was going to be human again, why couldn't she have her former strong body back? This silly duck had gotten a good deal and was still complaining. Despite her slight regret, at least she was human now. Not only could she stay away from those pesky bugs, but she wouldn't have to live in a cage anymore. Most importantly, she could finally do all the things she wanted to do with Karamit. Reyna flung herself at Karamit, embracing him tightly. She kept repeating his name, tears streaming down her face like rain. Karamit patiently stayed with Reyna, watching her cry until her eyes were swollen. He couldn't help but feel a pang of heartache for her. Once Reyna had calmed down, Karamit gently asked if she was frightened by her sudden change in appearance. Reyna was instantly at a loss for words, unsure where to begin. Her story was too complicated. Even if she told him, Karamit wouldn't believe her. Besides, he would then learn that she was just a character from a game. She couldn't bear to see Karamit devastated by the truth. So, Reyna fabricated an excuse, claiming she was afraid because she had almost died from eating a strange fruit. Karamit slowly drew closer to Reyna, his voice filled with tenderness. This had been the longest night of his life. He wished he could take her pain upon himself. Perhaps the heavens had heard his prayers, not only allowing Reyna to wake up, but also to be here with him, face to face. He gently pulled Reyna into his arms. If she were to leave him now, he would be utterly alone. He truly didn't know how he would go on. All because this little duck had been too greedy and eaten that fruit. She had woken up to find herself transformed into a human, yet her frail body was a great disappointment. She longed for the strength of her former body. Reyna blushed crimson at the unexpected embrace. Looking at the refined and elegant Keramet before her, her heart could barely contain itself. Reyna couldn't understand how he managed to maintain such a captivating aura at all times. It was almost as if he was trying to tempt her into doing something scandalous. Keramet, noticing Reyna's discomfort, assumed his embrace was awkward and quickly adjusted his hold. This shift only intensified the pressure on Reyna, who inwardly cursed the man for still treating her like a raven. Mortified, Reyna wished she could turn back into a raven and disappear into the floorboards. Incredibly, that's exactly what happened. The sudden transformation left her mind completely blank. When she came to her senses, panic flooded her. Was shapeshifting some kind of pay-to-win feature? Did she need to spend a fortune on microtransactions to maintain her human form? Seeing her distress, Keramet held her close and told her to calm down. He explained that shapeshifting required practice and that she would master it with time. He then offered to demonstrate the technique, instructing her to watch carefully. With a flash of golden light, Keramet transformed into a wolf. The magnificent creature made Reyna's heart flutter. It was a feast for the eyes of any beast lover. Keramet slowly approached Reyna and nuzzled her beak. The gesture startled Reyna. Unfazed, Keramet, having taken this small liberty, shifted back to his human form. He explained to Reyna that she simply had to do the same. It was very easy. Reyna was speechless. She flapped her wings, indicating she hadn't understood a thing. Keramet fell into deep thought. Had he not explained it well enough? Was that why Reyna couldn't grasp the technique? After pondering for a moment, he added that she simply needed to focus and visualize her desired form. Reyna stared intently at Keramet, highly skeptical of his explanation. Who knew that in the next second, she would suddenly transform into a human? Reyna could hardly believe it. It was truly that simple. She had succeeded. The next day, the two went to the dining hall together. For Reyna, who hadn't tasted delicious food in a long time, it was a divine gift. Watching Reyna devour the meal before her, a happy smile spread across Keramet's face. But one thing puzzled him. He couldn't help but ask Reyna how she could use cutlery so skillfully. This startled Reyna. She had completely forgotten about that in her enjoyment of the food. She hastily offered a flurry of confused explanations. Once Reyna had eaten her fill, Keramet, wanting to keep her human form hidden from others, asked her to transform back into a raven. Reyna listened and once again became the adorable little bird. After transforming back, Reyna felt a thrill of excitement. She had finally mastered the art of shape-shifting. Although there were many inconveniences in raven form, she could do things that were impossible as a human. As long as she made perfect use of both forms, she was sure to achieve great things in the future. This endearing little raven, having accidentally transformed into a human after eating the magical fruit, finally mastered the skill of shape-shifting under Keramet's careful guidance. This unique ability filled her with hope for the future. Under Reyna's death stare, the servants clearing the tables hurriedly finished their work and fled the dining hall. Once they were gone, Keramet spoke, his voice filled with apology. He admitted to having selfish reasons for asking Reyna to hide her identity. He did so because he had something he needed to ask of her. This instantly sparked Reyna's imaginative mind. Was he going to ask her to impersonate a double agent? Or perhaps play the role of a younger brother? Or maybe he wanted her to disguise herself as a beautiful assassin and eliminate some rival. No matter what Keramet asked her to do, she would be willing to risk everything for him. However, what Keramet wanted to ask was for Reyna to protect herself. He knew his little brother's temperament well. Anything Reyna desired, she would pursue relentlessly. The palace was currently rife with danger. If Reyna appeared in human form, she could encounter peril at any moment. Keramet gently caressed Reyna's cheek. He hoped she could endure the situation a little longer. He promised to make this place safe for Reyna, no matter what form she took. These tender and thoughtful words made Reyna blush. She tugged gently on the corner of Keramit's robe. As long as she could stay by his side and help him, she was sure she wouldn't be in danger. She wanted to help Keramit achieve his ambitions as soon as possible. Her words, though simple, deeply moved Keramit. He pulled Reyna into a tight embrace. Unbeknownst to them, their affectionate display was witnessed by a certain little brother from afar. Leo Velen watched the sickeningly sweet scene, a sinister smile spreading across his face. Meanwhile, in a dark room outside the palace, a man with a shock of white hair was troubled. He was William, the Marquis, the mastermind behind the assassination attempt on Keramit. He couldn't understand how his seemingly perfect plan had allowed Keramit to escape with his life. He had participated in the plot because the other beastmen had promised that as long as a wolf remained in the Empire, they would never invade. It was for this reason that the nobles of the Empire had chosen Leo Velen. But the failure of the plan had led Leo Velen to abandon him. This was the source of his distress. He now had only two choices: either live the rest of his life in disgrace or find a new, powerful patron. To protect his beloved Reyna's safety, Keramit deliberately had her conceal her human identity within the palace. However, the secret Keramit tried so hard to keep was witnessed in its entirety by the little brother watching from a distance. After a night of careful consideration, William, the Marquis, finally decided to pledge his allegiance to Keramit. But when he arrived before Keramit, he was unnerved by the raven perched on Keramit's shoulder. He couldn't understand why the bird of death was perched on Keramit's shoulder. Keramit, wary of William's sudden appearance, questioned the Marquis's purpose. As Leo Velen's second-in-command, "Why are you here to see me?" Keramit's voice dripped with suspicion. Could it be a sudden pang of conscience? Have you come to apologize for your previous treachery? His words jolted William to a stark realization. The raven's presence was a clear message. One wrong word, and his life could end on the spot. The thought sent a shiver of fear down William's spine. He had no other options left. He began to carefully explain himself to Keramit, but his thinly veiled intentions were transparent. Keramit, showing no mercy, tore through William's pretense. "Your sudden eagerness to appease me stems from your failed assassination attempt and subsequent expulsion from Leo Velen's faction," Keramit stated coldly. Left with no other recourse, "You've come crawling to me for a lifeline." Keramit stepped closer, his gaze piercing. "Am I wrong?" William froze, his scheme exposed. The foolishness of his past actions crashed down upon him. He saw clearly now. Keramit was the one with the potential to become emperor. He fell to his knees before Keramit, overwhelmed with shame. He confessed his wrongdoings, accepting any punishment. "I deserve whatever comes my way," he choked out. "My life is yours." Keramit acknowledged William's abilities, but his fickle loyalty bred distrust. "Even if I spare you," Keramit said frankly, "your betrayal will forever cast a shadow of suspicion upon you. Can you endure such a life?" Keramit asked, his voice sharp. Relief washed over William. "It would be an honor," he quickly assured Keramit. After William's departure, Keramit and Reyna strolled through the gardens. Reyna couldn't comprehend Keramit's mercy. "Why spare someone so treacherous?" she asked. Keramit explained the strategic advantage of having William as an ally, emphasizing the importance of pragmatism over vengeance. He gently stroked Reyna's hair. "While William is no saint," he said softly, "it was his betrayal that led me to you, my beloved. I was nearly killed, yet I spared the mastermind behind the plot," Keramit mused. "And because of that, I found you." Keramit's sudden tenderness flustered Reyna. Amused by her reaction, Keramit asked a question that had been on his mind. "Why did you save me that day?" A raven would surely prefer a stranger's death. Reyna was speechless. She couldn't possibly confess her attraction to him. Then, an idea sparked. "Your golden hair. It was so radiant," she stammered. "I couldn't resist." She hadn't expected him to mistake her for a bird person or a princess. Keramit's eyes lit up. "If you love my golden hair so much, I'll cherish it forever," he vowed, leaning in to kiss her forehead. The unexpected kiss sent a jolt through Reyna. Mortified, she transformed back into a raven. Keramit had become her most cherished person. She refused to let prejudice against ravens tarnish his reputation. She needed to find a way to help him while remaining out of sight. A few days later, Keramet sat at his desk, a troubled expression on his face. The tension in the room was palpable. Gaelnos, standing nearby, felt it too. With the influential Marquis William now on his side, previously neutral nobles were flocking to Keramet's banner. Everything seemed to be going his way. What could possibly be troubling him so? Sensing the gravity of the situation, Gaelnos drew his sword. "As your protector, I will eliminate any source of your distress," he declared passionately. Keramet finally voiced his concern. "Reyna, my constant companion, has been deliberately avoiding me lately. How can I focus on anything else?" These words were like a bucket of cold water, dousing Galinos's fervor. He stood there, speechless with rage. What kind of magic did this raven possess? Not only had it won Keramet's favor, but it also occupied his every thought and worry. He loathed his own negligence. If he had been there to protect Keramet during the assassination attempt, this raven wouldn't even be in the picture. The situation being what it was, he had to make Keramet forget the raven as quickly as possible. With feigned righteousness, he told Keramet that he didn't understand the hearts of animals and couldn't resolve this issue. However, as a loyal servant, he felt obligated to fill the void in his master's heart. He was willing to pledge his life to Keramet, whether it meant cutting off his fingers or offering up his heart. He would stop at nothing. This raven, in order to help her beloved master achieve his grand ambitions, decided to find a father figure who could both keep her away from Keramet and assist him. But it was this deliberate distancing that only intensified Keramet's longing, making him even less focused on his duties. While Keramet stewed in his office, Reyna, alone in her room, was equally idle. Watching the bustling servants, she couldn't help but wish she had something to do. She had thought that mastering her transformation ability would allow her to spread her wings, but now she was confined to her room, bored witless. On the day William, the Marquis, pledged his allegiance to Keramet, Reyna realized that more and more people would be visiting Keramet. But when these visitors saw a raven of death constantly by the prince's side, they would react with apprehension. Everyone she had encountered since arriving in this world had shown some resistance to her presence. While she did understand the intricacies of the struggle for the throne, Reyna knew that the more aversion she caused, the worse it would be for Keramet. For now, with no solution in sight, she had to maintain a certain distance from Keramet. But Reyna didn't want this. Eating and sleeping all day would only make her plump. As Reyna gazed at the luxurious decorations in the room, practically drooling, she suddenly thought, since I'm doing nothing anyway, why not make a new friend? Her gaze settled on a sweet young servant girl. Reyna, clutching a blue-tinged white rose in her beak, flew towards the servant girl. Her sudden appearance startled the girl, who burst into tears, begging the Raven of Death to spare her. The next moment, Reyna placed a rose in her hand. The servant girl stared at the rose in disbelief. Could she really accept such a precious gift? As she hesitated, Keramet entered the room. He told the servant girl she could keep the rose. It was a gift she deserved. As she walked away, her opinion of Reyna had shifted considerably. She thought of the haughty demeanor of Leo Velen's servants, which filled her with a sudden surge of revulsion. Back to Reyna, her days of keeping her distance had led Keramet to mistakenly believe it was because of the young servant girl. This gave Reyna the unsettling feeling of having been caught cheating. She quickly explained her true intentions. She didn't want her raven form to scare away Keramet's visitors. After all, Keramet himself had been wary of her when they first met. These words stung Keramet. However, understanding that Reyna was acting in his best interest, Keramet felt a surge of affection. He knelt before her, gently taking her claw in his hand, and declared with heartfelt sincerity that if anyone turned away from him because of Reyna, then their company wasn't worth having. In this treacherous palace, only where Reyna was did he feel truly safe. So he pleaded with Reyna to stop avoiding him. Whether she desired glittering jewels or a feast of delicacies, he would fulfill every request. All he wanted was to know what Reyna needed. Faced with Keramet's outpouring of emotion, Reyna was momentarily speechless. None of what he offered was what she truly desired. Before she could speak, her raven instincts took over, and she blurted out that she wanted a raven mate. Keramet was dumbfounded. What kind of cosmic joke was this? Was she asking him to facilitate his own cuckolding? Who could understand such a thing? This raven, right in front of him, was asking him to find her a male raven. Karamit was utterly bewildered. What kind of fool would willingly orchestrate their own betrayal? Without a second thought, he flatly refused Reyna's request. In his heart, Karamit harbored a selfish desire. Though Reyna could now transform into a human, she was, after all, born a raven. It was perfectly normal for her to request a male drake as a mate. But how could he bear the thought of his beloved Reyna belonging to some unremarkable drake? If Reyna insisted on finding a mate, he would hold a national selection process. He would ensure that the most exceptional drake in the empire became her partner. Though he could reluctantly part with her, he didn't want it to happen. After all, in this world, there was no second Reyna. Just then, Reyna snapped back to reality, her face flushed with embarrassment. She cursed her raven instincts, wondering why they had to surface at that moment. Karamit, resolute in his decision, slowly approached Reyna and whispered in her ear. If she truly desired a mate, as long as she could maintain her human form, he was willing to be her lifelong companion. Reyna's temperature soared at his words, her face crimson with a blush. Her instincts, long dormant, were now clamoring for attention, threatening to take over. To prevent herself from uttering any more nonsense, she transformed back into a raven and zipped up to hide amongst the crystals of the chandelier. Looking at the flustered Reyna, Karamit couldn't help but chuckle. He wondered why she was always so shy. Perched on a chandelier, Reyna nearly ground her teeth to dust. As a perpetual singleton, she was always being teased by Karamit. But he shouldn't celebrate too soon. She would get her revenge eventually. Calming himself, Karamit fell into deep thought. The days he spent with Reyna were always relaxing and carefree. Whether it was the pressure of the fight for the throne, or the political machinations of the palace, or even the deep-seated fear of death, it all seemed to fade into insignificance. Whenever he was with Reyna, gazing at her innocent smile, stroking her vibrant hair, and looking into her large, expressive eyes, he felt a sense of being favored by fate, a feeling that instilled within him an unshakable conviction of victory. His dearest Reyna, the Reyna who was willing to sacrifice everything for him. When all the dangers had passed, there were a few things he wanted to tell her. This raven, due to a 10-minute encounter with a ferocious beast in her past life, was reincarnated as a raven by the heavens. She met the Wolf Prince during an assassination attempt, and from that moment on, she captured his heart. That day, under Karamit's persuasive charm, Reyna agreed to join him in his office to handle official matters. It had to be said, a handsome man acting cute was irresistible, even for a raven. Since Reyna hadn't been to the office in a while, she looked around, noticing that it had become much more ornate. She felt something was amiss. Decorating a prince's private chambers so lavishly was understandable, but filling an office with ornaments seemed extravagant and wasteful. Besides, Karamit had been working overtime every day recently, leaving him little time to appreciate such decorations. Her feminine intuition told her something wasn't right. She decided to transform back into her human form and confirm her suspicions with Karamit. Thanks to Reyna's observation, Karamit also realized something was off. He hadn't ordered these decorations. Immediately, Karamit called Galenose from outside and instructed him to fetch Namer from the Duke's residence. Upon receiving the summons, Namer arrived quickly. After a thorough inspection, he indeed discovered something amiss. Hidden within the ornaments were image memory crystals. These devices functioned like surveillance equipment. Someone had deliberately placed them there to monitor Karamit. Crucially, the memory crystals had been shielded with magic, which explained why even a high-ranking knight like Galenose hadn't detected them. Moreover, the mage responsible possessed far greater skill than Namer. Karamit immediately guessed who was behind it. Such underhanded tactics were characteristic of his younger brother. This meant that a powerful mage was now involved in the struggle for the throne. Namer continued to search the office. To Reyna's astonishment, he discovered 4 more crystals in addition to the first. Karamit, despite being an imperial prince, found himself in danger due to the struggle for the throne. Caught in the very center of this maelstrom, a chilling fear began to grip his heart. Fortunately, these memory crystals, due to Karamit's recent overtime work, hadn't been replaced and were long past their expiration date. Namer suggested they immediately dispose of this treacherous dust to eliminate any future threats. This incident plunged Galenos into yet another wave of self-reproach. He had been in and out of the office numerous times recently, yet hadn't noticed a single crystal. He felt utterly incompetent. How could he possibly still be worthy of protecting Karamat? Just as Namer prepared to inspect Karamat's room, Karamat, with a sigh of exasperation, interrupted Namer. "None of that matters right now," he said. "The immediate priority is figuring out how to stop Galenos." He was the crown prince, yet he was embroiled in a perilous fight for the throne. If it weren't for his beloved Reyna's astute perception of something amiss, their little secret would have been completely exposed to the emperor. After Namer's thorough inspection, a large number of memory crystals were also discovered in Karamat's room. This incident immediately sparked widespread panic within the palace. Nearly everyone who had entered Karamat's room was to be arrested and interrogated. This caused one individual, the young servant girl who had recently received the flower, to become extremely anxious. Her younger brother was gravely ill, and she had been coerced by William to assist in his scheme. With all suspects detained, the steward reported the current situation to Karamat. Knowing his younger brother's ruthless methods, Karamat understood that William would surely silence anyone who confessed. He immediately instructed the steward to ensure the utmost safety of those imprisoned. After the steward departed, Karamat gestured, summoning a shadowy figure. Unable to fully trust even the steward, he tasked the shadow with monitoring the steward's every move. These recent events had left Karamat utterly overwhelmed. Although the matter of the memory crystals was temporarily resolved, he still hadn't identified which high-ranking mage was colluding with William. However, it did shed light on why Marquis William had fallen out of favor. One thing puzzled him. William hadn't used the high-ranking mage to assassinate him. Could he be showing deference to the current, ailing emperor? But he couldn't afford to be complacent. After all, no one could truly fathom the mind of a fanatic. Fortunately, news of his awakening seemed to have eluded William. Otherwise, William would undoubtedly have taken action. His most immediate concern was Reyna. She had spent the most time in the room, even transforming several times. And from the moment she entered, she had remained perched atop the wardrobe, refusing to come down. He suspected this incident had deeply affected her. Karamat tried to reassure Reyna that it was safe now, and he had reinforced the security around the room. But Reyna ignored his words, even turning her head away from him. Karamat had no idea that the raven before him wasn't truly Reyna. Deep within, Reyna's consciousness was trapped by the raven's instincts. She struggled to break free and regain control of her body. Furious, she cried out to the raven, "Running away won't solve anything. Let me out. Karamat needs me now." But the raven refused. "It's too dangerous out there," it insisted. "And you need to understand, in Karamat's countless futures, the deathbird Reyna never existed." It warned Reyna not to trust anyone. Late that night, Karamat sat alone on the sofa, consumed by worry. He had prepared Reyna's favorite delicacies, but she still refused to descend from the wardrobe. Then, Karamat suddenly remembered that animals, when feeling threatened, often avoid eating in front of others. He rose to leave the room, wanting to give Reyna some space. "If there's any danger," he told her, "cry out." Karamat had barely left the room when Reyna fluttered her wings, preparing to enjoy the food. In the next instant, an old man appeared, swiftly binding Reyna. With a flash of light, he vanished, leaving behind only Reyna's necklace. Sensing danger, the raven had chosen to withdraw and isolate itself from Karamat, only to be abducted by a cloaked figure during its solitude. Reyna gradually regained consciousness, the pain throbbing through her. In a haze, she thought she saw William berating someone. At this moment, an elderly voice desperately defended himself. He claimed he'd only knocked the raven unconscious because it struggled so fiercely. He then inquired of William whether he should summon a healer. William casually waved him off. He stated that such a fuss was unnecessary. This unconscious state, in fact, suited his purposes better. If Reyna recovered, she would undoubtedly try to escape. Reyna, listening in, was genuinely curious. Were villains these days so brazen? Why were they so eager to reveal their despicable nature? Their behavior was truly appalling. After dismissing the old man, William grabbed one of Raina's wings. A cruel smile spread across his face. It was time, he thought, for a deeper exchange with his new pet. He gazed at Raina, struggling in his grasp. While he longed to avenge the earlier humiliation, he offered a deal. If Raina would maintain her human form, he would forgive her transgression and grant her unimaginable riches and luxury. This was a death bird, he declared, an opportunity for fortune that came only once in a lifetime. Raina was utterly speechless, her eyes nearly rolling back in her head. So this little whelp was coveting her beauty, she realized. With that, she lashed out, striking William across the face with her wing. William flew into a rage and roughly tossed Raina into a cage. He roared, ranting about Karamat being a useless fool, incapable of protecting her. From now on, he declared, Raina belonged to him, William. Inside the cage, Raina, terrified by William's outburst, huddled fearfully. Trembling, she nevertheless gleaned a vital piece of information. William was unaware that Karamat had awakened his powers. For now, survival was paramount. William warned Raina that even if she screamed her lungs out, no one would come to her rescue. The room, he claimed, was fortified with powerful magic. No one could enter without his permission. Meanwhile, outside the door, Karamat, Gaelnos, and Namer frantically pounded on it. The moment Raina disappeared, Karamat knew his younger brother was behind it. But despite their best efforts, they couldn't breach the door. Karamat, burning with anxiety, realized that force wouldn't work. He needed another way in. He thought of the servants imprisoned in the dungeons and decided to try his luck there. Karamat raced to the dungeons without pause. The young servant girl, seeing him appear so suddenly, tensed, fearing he had discovered something and come to punish her. However, Karamat hadn't come for retribution. Instead, he appealed to her compassion and sense of justice, moving her with his plea. Remembering her ailing brother, she decided to take a gamble. Meanwhile, William continued his attempts to persuade Raina to submit to him and embrace a life of luxury. Raina understood the gravity of her situation. If she agreed to William's demands, she would live, at least long enough for Karamat to rescue her. But the thought of William's lecherous face filled her with disgust. She longed to deliver another well-aimed kick. Ignoring William's entreaties, she spat at him. Enraged, William lifted the cage, ready to throw Raina against the bars. At that critical moment, William's door exploded inward. Karamat, along with Gaelnos and Namer, burst into the room. His foolish little brother, Karamat thought, had taken his joke too far. Because of her breathtaking beauty, this raven had not only captured the heart of the male lead, but had also been kidnapped by her possessive younger brother. The raven refused to yield to her brother's coercion. Left with no other choice, the younger brother resorted to drastic measures to force her compliance. Just as she was about to face danger, the male lead and his companions stormed into the room. William, stunned, stared at the intruders. He had cast a powerful spell on the room. How had they gotten in? Karamat smirked. It had taken some effort to break the spell, but what goes around comes around. The young servant girl stepped forward, bravely admitting she had helped Karamat. Nervously, she reminded William of his own order, which granted her free access to the room. William's mind went blank. Who was this impudent girl? The scene hung heavy with awkward silence. The young servant girl was devastated. Karamat, unfazed, turned his anger on William, berating him for not even remembering his own servants, let alone being fit to rule the empire. William, stung by these words, flew into a rage, shouting that Karamat was nothing but an unawakened failure. He accused Karamat of causing such a commotion over a mere raven and relying on the help of insignificant pawns. With someone like Karamat, William declared, the empire was doomed to ruin. Karamat remained unmoved by William's outburst, instead displaying his leadership qualities. Raina was his responsibility, he stated. She was worth this effort. Moreover, even a prince was still human, and everyone faced problems they couldn't solve alone. That was why people needed help. Had William never relied on the strength of others? He challenged William, asking which of his recent schemes he had accomplished entirely on his own. The word failure, Karamat concluded, seemed far more fitting for William himself. Karamat then attempted to reason with his foolish younger brother, urging him to stand down and reconsider his actions. If he continued down this path, he would lose everything. William, enraged by Karamat's words, resorted to violence, unable to win the argument. He seized Reyna, still in raven form, by the throat, threatening to tear her apart. Keramit's composure shattered. His plan had been to distract William long enough for Gaelnos and Namer to subdue him, allowing him to continue concealing his awakening. But now, he couldn't afford such caution. With a roar, he transformed into a massive wolf and lunged at William. Killer instinct surged through Keramit. He would allow no one to harm his beloved Reyna. Just as he was about to finish William, Reyna's weak croak stayed his hand, lessening the force of his blow. The young servant girl cried out, frantic, that Reyna needed immediate healing and any delay could be fatal. Forced to restrain himself, Keramit settled for teaching his younger brother a lesson. He quickly returned to Reyna's side, shifting back to his human form. Gazing at her severe injuries, his heart ached. He gently asked if she would allow him to take her for treatment. With the last of her strength, Reyna placed her claw in Keramit's hand. Fighting back tears, Keramit scooped her up, grateful for her consent. Fury burned within him that his beloved Reyna had been put in such danger. He was willing to expose his hidden secret to end this threat. If it weren't for Reyna's grave injuries, William might not have survived the encounter. Back in his room, under the care of a healer, Reyna's condition stabilized, but she remained unconscious, renewing Keramit's anxiety. The healer explained that the trauma might be causing Reyna to resist waking. While they could heal her physical wounds, her emotional wounds needed time to mend. Keramit's fists clenched. He made a dangerous decision. He would challenge William to a death match. There was a royal tradition, the Boscut, overseen by the Old Wolf King, in which princes with a claim to the throne fought to the death in their wolf forms. Serious injury was commonplace in these duels. Death was a very real possibility. But there was one advantage. Neither side's supporters could interfere. The victor would inherit the throne unconditionally. Keramit strode alone into the palace gardens. He transformed into a giant golden wolf and let out a deafening howl. The entire palace shook. Everyone within staggered, knocked off their feet by the force of the roar. This was the Boscut challenge. A moment later, a silver wolf appeared before Keramit. With a flash of light, the silver wolf shifted back to his human form. It was the Old Wolf King, who had been bedridden. He had come to confirm Keramit's resolve. Keramit said nothing. His unwavering gaze was answer enough. However, William was currently severely injured from some incident. The duel would have to wait until he recovered. The Old Wolf King raised his hand and declared that from this day forward, until a victor emerged. By order of the king, no interference with this decision will be tolerated. Disobedience will be met with death. No exceptions. Returning to his room, Keramit observed the young servant girl attending to Reyna, a wave of gratitude washing over him. The young servant girl seemed unfazed by the gravity of the situation, but she was deeply grateful to Keramit. He had not only taken her in, despite the stigma attached to her, but had also provided a wet nurse to heal her younger brother. For this, she would dedicate herself even more to Reyna's care. Her only wish now was for Reyna to awaken quickly. Deep within Reyna's consciousness, she slowly opened her eyes, seeing herself still trapped within this strange place. A surge of anger coursed through her. She furiously demanded that the annoying raven, Yaya, release her immediately. Her beloved Keramit must be worried sick. But Yaya repeated the same tired excuses, urging Reyna to remain patiently within the depths of her mind, claiming the outside world was too dangerous. This infuriated Reyna. Hadn't her own recklessness led to this perilous situation? Yaya, sensing Reyna's irritation, quickly changed the subject. She warned Reyna that all animals instinctively recoil from those who resemble individuals who have harmed them. She feared Reyna might develop a fear of Keramit. Reyna considered this. There was certainly some truth to the notion, but she suspected Yaya was exaggerating. How could her Keramit possibly be compared to William? She grabbed Yaya. Even if she did develop a fear, she would find a way to overcome it. Running away wouldn't solve anything. Reyna continued, her voice sharp. I've suffered enough because of you. Isn't it time you listened to me for once? Yaya, realizing she couldn't win this argument, finally agreed to release Reyna. But she reminded Reyna that they were one and the same. Her thoughts were also a part of Reyna's instincts. The moment Reyna regained control of her body, she cried out and lunged towards the man she had longed for. Having endured so much, Reyna, in her adorable raven form, finally awoke from the depths of her consciousness. The instant she transformed back into her human form, she threw herself into Keramit's arms. Keramit was startled by Reyna's sudden awakening. Before he could react, he was knocked to the ground. Reyna clung to him tightly, repeatedly apologizing for causing him so much worry. Burying her face in his chest, she expressed her profound gratitude for his unwavering efforts to save her life. Relief flooded Keramit's heart. A joyful smile spread across his face as he gently stroked Reyna's hair. He told her it was he who should be thanking her for not leaving him. However, Reyna's human form shocked the young servant girl. She could hardly believe that the raven, Yaya, had transformed into a human. In her astonishment, she knocked over the water basin, leaving a mess on the floor. Mortified, she began to clean up the spilled water. She berated herself for creating such a mess when she should have kept the room spotless. Keramit and Reyna, however, were unconcerned and urged her not to worry about it. But the servant girl's guilt remained. If only she hadn't obeyed William's orders, Reyna wouldn't have suffered so much. Tears welled up in her eyes. If she couldn't even perform her simple duties properly, how could she have the audacity to stay here? Reyna crouched down in front of the weeping girl and softly comforted her. She explained that as a raven, she hadn't understood the complexities of the royal power struggle, but she admired the servant girl's bravery. She compared her to a small rabbit defying a hungry wolf. Even if she hadn't helped William, someone else would have. Besides, if she hadn't opened William's door, the raven Yaya, now Reyna, wouldn't be standing before her. Reyna urged the servant girl to let go of her guilt, expressing her sincere gratitude for everything she had done. The young girl's eyes overflowed with tears at Reyna's kind words. Keramit seized the opportunity and suggested that the servant girl become Reyna's personal attendant. Since she already knew so much, it would be the safest course of action, especially given the potential threat from William. Reyna excitedly embraced the young servant girl, eagerly asking for her name. Overwhelmed by their kindness, the servant girl choked back tears and revealed her name, Namer. Then, with heartfelt conviction, Namer swore she would never forget their compassion. Even under torture, she would never betray them. Reyna finally managed to soothe the young servant girl, Namer. Unlike the other servants who longed to finish their work early, Namer was the first Reyna had encountered who actively sought more hours. A mischievous grin spread across Keramit's face. It seemed Reyna knew quite a bit about the palace's inner workings. He'd have to tell the treasurer to dock the other servants' pay. Seeing Reyna's incredulous stare, Keramit quickly explained he was joking. He then filled Reyna in on recent events. When she learned that Keramit was going to fight a death match with William, she was overcome with panic. The current course of events had drastically deviated from what she'd anticipated. She was deeply worried about Keramit's safety. Seeing her distress, Keramit comforted her, saying that this didn't have much to do with her. He and William were destined to clash eventually. This just moved the timeline forward. He urged her not to worry so much. As he spoke, Keramit reached out to touch Reyna, but she instinctively flinched away. This left him perplexed. He asked if she was still recovering. Reyna said she was fine, but deep down, she realized this was the instinctive aversion Yaya, the raven, had warned her about. She was truly and unconsciously resisting Keramit. What was she going to do? Suddenly, a golden light flashed, and Keramit transformed into a giant wolf. Brushing against Keramit's fur brought Reyna a sense of calm. The next moment, Keramit shifted back to his human form, and Reyna instinctively recoiled. Just as Keramit suspected, Reyna didn't resist him in his wolf form. Fortunately, William had used his injuries as an excuse to postpone the duel. This gave him time to help Reyna recover slowly. He hoped Reyna would lean on him more. He told her not to keep everything bottled up inside. His words unleashed a torrent of pent-up emotions, and Reyna threw herself into Keramit's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. While they shared this tender moment, a chilling air hung over Galen's quarters. The fact that his beloved Yaya had been in danger, forcing him to reveal his awakening, had shocked his most loyal knights. It also stirred a complex mix of emotions within him. Galen was training, pouring his energy into the practice arena. He recalled Keramit's awakening. Even Namer knew about it. Yet he, Galen, had been kept in the dark like a fool. The thought infuriated him, and his movements grew more forceful, knocking down his sparring partners one after another. Galen understood that Karamet, scarred by past betrayals, had chosen to trust no one. But he, Galen, had sworn his life to Karamet. Did that mean he, Galen, wasn't worthy of trust? He had aspired to be a knight since childhood, and guarding Karamet was his life's honor. His mentor had often advised him to pledge allegiance to William, but he had always refused with unwavering resolve. When Karamet had disappeared, everyone believed him dead. Only he, Galen, had gone searching for him. When he finally found Karamet, he discovered him changed, a raven constantly by his side. The more Galen thought about it, the more frustrated he became. He decided to confront Karamet directly. But the moment Galen opened the door, he was met with a jarring sight. A man and a raven were nestled together comfortably in the room. He frowned at the raven peeking out from Karamet's embrace. Karamet, seeing his expression, shifted back to his human form. He knew Galen was upset. Galen didn't hold back, voicing his discontent. Karamet had risked exposing his awakening for this raven, a secret even he, Galen, hadn't known. Was this bird of death truly worth it? Karamet sighed. He was deeply grateful for Galen's unwavering loyalty, but he was also sorry that Galen had learned of his awakening this way. He had intended to tell him about Reyna once everything was settled. Now, it seemed, he had to explain sooner. Karamet then instructed Reyna to reveal her human form to Galen. He then explained everything to Galen and asked him to protect Reyna for the next 10 days. This greatly puzzled Galen. Karamet, who had always kept his distance from women, was now asking him to protect one. This must mean Karamet trusted him completely. In an instant, the resentment in Galen's heart vanished without a trace. He silently resolved to protect their future. Galen reconsidered, realizing the situation was more complicated than it seemed. It appeared that Karamet and Reyna were destined to marry and have children. The thought of playing with their future children melted Galen's tough guy heart. He dropped to his knees with a thud, loudly proclaiming his willingness to go through fire and water for his prince. This deafening oath nearly startled Reyna out of her wits. Galen, his confidence restored, headed to the library with Namer, determined to find a way to help Karamet within the royal archives. But they searched all afternoon without finding the answers they sought. Just as Galen was growing impatient, Marquis William entered the library. His arrival was met with hostility. Galen couldn't resist taunting William, calling him a fence-sitter. Marquis William didn't take the insult to heart. Instead, he told them they were allies on the same side. He then asked them if they knew that the old Wolf King had also ascended the throne through the basket. He had challenged his younger brother to a duel to the death for his beloved Yaya. This worried the group immensely. They had searched through countless books to help Karamet, but found nothing useful. Then Marquis William appeared, sharing a royal secret. He vividly remembered the old Wolf King's duel. The fight lasted for days. Both sides fought with all their might, and the scene was incredibly bloody. The reason there was no record of it in the books was likely because the royal family didn't want their infighting to become a public joke. Galen was utterly bewildered by this story. He couldn't understand William's intentions. Was he trying to persuade them to give up? William quickly clarified that he wasn't there to dissuade them. He, too, hoped Karamet would win easily. He didn't want to see such a brilliant talent weakened by a duel. William knew Levelin would resort to dirty tricks. But the old Wolf King had given the order, and William couldn't directly intervene to help Karamet. So, he could only offer a small suggestion. Since they couldn't find answers in the royal archives, why not look at the nobles' records? Perhaps they'd find an unexpected surprise there. With that, Marquis William turned and left the library. Namer and Galen were suddenly enlightened and threw themselves back into their research. The next morning, Galen burst excitedly into Karamet's room, requesting a sparring match with him. He had read that the old Wolf King's victory was due to his daily sparring practice. Karamet, abruptly awakened, was sleepy and grumpy. He wasn't receptive to anyone's help at the moment. Galen, brimming with confidence, reassured Karamet. The old Wolf King had also sparred during the basket. Since there was precedent, there wouldn't be any issues for them either. Furthermore, to prevent Levelin from cheating, Namer had gone to keep an eye on Levelin's mage. Karamet was deeply touched. They had been so thoughtful, but he didn't want to see them get hurt because of this. Just as Karamet was about to refuse, Reyna spoke up, urging him to participate in the sparring. She warned Karamet not to underestimate his opponent. She had seen too many powerful beasts lose their lives through carelessness. As she spoke, Reyna leaned against Karamet, her body trembling involuntarily. She wanted Karamet to do everything he could to survive. She truly didn't want to lose the one she loved most. Moved by Reyna's tenderness, Karamet agreed and instructed Galen to begin the sparring session. On the training grounds, the two fought back and forth, neither yielding an inch. Watching from afar, Reyna couldn't help but sigh. A man focused on his purpose was truly breathtaking. If only she could help Karamet too. His little bird brain had actually found a loophole. He wasn't nobility, nor was he human. If he employed a bit of trickery, it shouldn't violate the rules, right? He quickly dismissed the thought. What if he acted on his own and encountered danger? While Reyna was deep in thought, a squabble erupted behind him. Two tiny fledglings were brawling over food. Seeing this, Reyna rushed to intervene. To his surprise, the two little birds turned out to be quite the shrewd negotiators and directed their ire at him. Reyna was bewildered but impressed. Meanwhile, Levelin was lying in bed, fuming. He cursed Karamet for his underhanded tactics, keeping his awakening a secret. An elderly man beside him tried to soothe Levelin's anger, telling him not to get so worked up. He had his own methods. In a blink, the old man transformed into a vibrant, youthful figure. A plume of black smoke slowly enveloped Levelin. To help his beloved, he struck a deal with the two shrewd birds he'd encountered. Food in exchange for information about Karamet. This, however, led Karamet, unaware of the situation, to wildly misinterpret things. He thought Levelin was making secret pacts with outside birds. Rewinding to earlier that morning, Reyna was trembling, intimidated by the two fledglings' sharp tongues. Timidly, he asked for their help. This made one of the fledglings suspicious. They weren't the same kind. How could they communicate so easily? He immediately asked Reyna if he had eaten a glowing fruit. Reyna was stunned. How did they know? Despite their small size, these two were incredibly worldly. They warned Reyna not to underestimate them. They'd been in the palace for years and had seen it all. This sparked a thought in Reyna's mind. Were there other ravens in the palace who had consumed the fruit? The fledglings confirmed his suspicion. Reyna began to scheme. If he could meet this senior raven, could he learn from them? Could they help him fulfill his dream of becoming a raven knight? He asked the fledglings for an introduction, but was flatly refused. They told him to stop inquiring about this important figure. Important people didn't like being gossiped about. Reyna's enthusiasm was instantly doused. He realized it wouldn't be that simple. If it weren't for the fledgling's timely reminder, he would have forgotten his main objective. Meanwhile, Karamet, currently in a duel, had lost his focus. This was the first time he'd seen Reyna chat with other birds for so long. Galen, ever perceptive, offered to eliminate the rival, distracting the prince if Karamet so wished. If Karamet hadn't stopped him, the misunderstanding could have escalated dramatically. Reyna, perched in a tree, suddenly felt a chill and hurriedly made his request to the fledglings. He wanted them to spy on Levelin. The fledglings considered for a moment and agreed. They, too, despised the arrogant third prince. But then they added a condition. Their services weren't free. Reyna would have to compensate them for information. Reyna rushed back to his room, hoping Namer, the little servant girl, could prepare some food. Karamet, following close behind, overheard and was alarmed, his voice laced with suspicion. After Reyna explained, Karamet understood it was all for him. This filled him with guilt. His own weakness was causing Reyna such worry. Karamet had always carried a deep sense of unease. So many had sacrificed their lives for him along the way. Would Reyna have been happier without him? Seeing his distress, Reyna quickly took Karamet's hand. He was only trying to help, not because he lacked trust. He couldn't bear to watch his beloved risk his life while he stood idly by. He was with Karamet because he was happy. These words restored Karamet's confidence. No matter what happened, Reyna always soothed his troubled heart. Namer, meanwhile, was struggling to find a mage who could help Levelin. His only lead was that the mage was high-ranking. Finding this individual among the countless mages in the realm was like searching for a needle in a haystack. Just as Namer was furrowing his brow in worry, the Little Bean detectives unexpectedly stumbled upon a new clue. Karamet, the Empire's first prince, was constantly plagued by anxieties stemming from his perceived weakness. It wasn't until he met his destined mate, Reyna, that his troubled heart found solace. The Bean detectives, after a night of diligent surveillance, were now enjoying the fruits of their labor. In the distance, three dogs watched their every move with keen interest. Reyna's approach truly impressed Galen. The little handmaiden swelled with pride for her master. Galen, caught up in a moment, began to lecture the young handmaiden on the proper way to devote one's youth to their lord. Seeing this, Karamat quickly intervened, putting a stop to this contagious behavior. He pulled the handmaiden away from Galen, urging her to make a hasty retreat. With the bean detectives gone, Karamat inquired about Reyna's findings. Reyna enthusiastically launched into an explanation for the three of them. However, his words were nothing but a flurry of caws and squawks. The three listeners were utterly dumbfounded. Karamat urged Reyna to calm down, gather his thoughts, and try explaining again. Reyna responded with another torrent of caws. Karamat was at a complete loss. Karamat pleaded with Reyna to translate. Reyna then realized he had been speaking in bird speak. This, however, presented a new dilemma. He consulted with Reyna, his inner raven, for translation. After this internal dialogue, Reyna coughed, attempting to dispel the awkwardness. He explained that a man met regularly with Levelin. However, due to Bird's inability to distinguish human faces, he could only offer a vague description. The man's face was covered in hair, and he radiated a dangerous aura, almost as if he didn't belong in this world. Armed with these new clues, Karamat prepared to consult with Namer. After further analysis, Namer concluded that the only individual in the Empire possessing such power was Bupelos. Rumor had it that Bupelos was currently researching demonic legions. It was imperative to devise a counter-strategy quickly, without violating any established rules. Namer was incredibly curious how Karamat had acquired such vital intelligence. A proud smile spread across Karamat's face as he explained that a highly trustworthy informant had provided the information. Meanwhile, this very informant was facing a formidable challenge of his own. He was surrounded by a flock of tiny being creatures, all clamoring for treats. The little handmaiden, observing from the side, felt a surge of warmth. Her young master had made so many wonderful friends. Upon arriving in Pascut that day, Karamat sat at dinner with a grim expression. The tense atmosphere worried Reyna. He knew a bloody battle was imminent, and the thought of Karamat's golden fur stained with blood was unbearable. Karamat, noticing Reyna's unease, asked for a prayer for good luck, hoping to reassure him. Reyna abruptly stood and agreed without hesitation. Karamat then instructed Reyna to close his eyes. In the next instant, Karamat kissed Reyna, albeit with his hand between their lips. He promised Reyna a real kiss upon his triumphant return. Reyna's face flushed crimson with embarrassment. He quickly transformed back into a raven to hide his blush. This also helped Karamat ease his own tension. He resolved to return alive for Reyna. He had once believed he could live happily ever after with his family. But everything changed when his mother fell gravely ill. His father, consumed with caring for her, neglected his children. It was during this time that Bupelos's powers awakened. This event triggered factions to form within the court. Ultimately, his younger brother perished, and he himself nearly lost his life in the power struggles. Unable to face reality, his mother succumbed to despair and passed away. Her death shattered the already fragile bonds of their family. Led to this. Now, the two brothers were forced to face each other, blades drawn. The old Wolf King, standing on the platform, loudly declared the official start of the Pascut Games. He reiterated the rules. No outside interference was permitted. Any act of cheating would result in immediate disqualification. With that, he wished the two princes good luck. Down in the arena, the duel raged. Up in the stands, Reyna, Levelin's group, and the others were far from relaxed. Every eye was fixed on the fight, wary of any tricks Levelin might pull. They had expected Levelin to fold quickly, but he was holding his own against Karamat, blow for blow. It seemed he was fighting with everything he had. As the spectators buzzed with excited discussion, an old man suddenly appeared before them. His eyesight was poor, and he couldn't see the action clearly, so he asked them to describe the fight. Galen, ever polite, quickly invited the old man to join them. But a prickle of unease ran down Galen's spine. Something about the old man felt off. Then, Namer, the little servant girl, noticed something strange. Levelin didn't seem to react to pain. No matter how fierce Karamat's attacks, he showed no sign of discomfort. This observation sparked something in Reyna. Even a fiercest beast flinches when hurt, he thought. Yet Levelin fought like an emotionless war machine. And that wasn't the strangest part. Every time Levelin landed a blow, Karamit's body would tremble. Reyna recognized the reaction from his past life. It was the involuntary twitch of an animal being electrocuted. Suddenly, a chilling realization dawned on Reyna. Unbeknownst to him, the newly arrived old man had observed his every reaction. This piqued his interest in Reyna considerably, though it wasn't his primary reason for being there. Still, the opportunity to observe the raven up close was intriguing.